was just saying, like, I think it would be an interesting idea if you have a kung fu movie, right? And the kung fu movie is also a zombie movie. So like you have the kung fu martial artists and then the zombies, and they're all like these dojo students, and then there's different levels of them, the masters and senseis and whatnot. And they've all turned, and you have the one guy who has to fight them. But they fight zombie style, but they're still martial arts, And that's all I'm saying. It'd be a cool movie. Oh, okay. All right, we're on then. All right, then. Here, let me get adjusted, Baka boy. Give me a count. 3, 2, 1. Hey kids, welcome back to another exciting episode of No Subs, No Dubs. I'm your host, Casey Kidd, Kamikaze Kidd, and we've got an exciting one here for you today. Ip Man, I've got the ips, basically. I've got the ips, and I wanted to watch a kung fu movie. So we decided Ip Man would be appropriate. Now, if you don't know, No Subs, No Dubs is a podcast, where I review a movie that I've watched without subtitles or dubs. And the first thing we usually do after this introduction is we spoil the movie. For the most part, I try to spoil the movie from what I remember from watching and my notes and being lost in translation, if you will, which was an idea for the first... Wasn't that an idea for the first title? And we just, nah. People just think it's a lost in translation podcast, like it's the same. It's me talking about the movie over and over again, which was not a good idea. So we went with No Subs, No Dubs. But anyway, that's the idea of the podcast. And we watched Ip Man today, and I'm super excited. Spoiler alert, it's a good movie. So, review spoiler alert. I enjoyed this movie immensely. We'll get into it later, but it was a very good movie. And, I was looking into it a little bit. I didn't read anything about the story or whatnot. I was like, is this based off a true story? And, yeah, Japan actually attacked China. It was the more you know, right? I saw the flags, and I was like, that's a Japanese... That's like the dot, right? That's World War II era. But lo and behold, yeah, Japan did invade China, and it was rough. They rustled some jimmies over there, and they're part of the Axis powers, which makes me wonder, Axis is also another thing where it's like, that name doesn't seem... It sounds like you're on the wrong side of history. Allied versus Axis. I think I want to be on the Allied team, right? Who chose those names? Axis? I don't know. Why? What does Axis even mean? Really? I don't know. Is it something that holds something up and there's an axis point? Or is it like, it makes me think evil side. Not that there, not that there's, never mind. Cut that out, Baka boy. We need to get into this. We need to get into the actual spoiler part of the show. And this is basically, like I said, where I tell you what happens in the movie. And if you've seen Ip Man, or if you haven't, you might want to pause here, watch it, and then listen to this. Or if you have, and it's been a while, you can listen back and you can go like, no, he got everything wrong, or he got everything right. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But Ip Man starts, and it has some, like, this cool, let's get down to business type music. It's very cool. Like, the music throughout is good. It is, I'll say that. That's a point. That's a plus point in the side for the review. And during this music, we see Mr. Ip, and he is fighting a wood pole, like a dummy wood pole kind of thing, and he's doing his fast movements and trying to go all flowy with it. And I was looking at it, I was like, where do I get that pole? Is that an Amazon order? Is that something that I need to look into? Is a wood pole for fighting? It seems to help this guy out really well. I always assume like a wood pole would hurt a lot if you punch it. That's why Mr. Ip was so powerful. He punched like wood. So he got like all hardened and calloused all over his body. So he's able just to mess people up. So there's this beginning with him fighting the wood pole. And then it starts in the city. This is like the main city. I have no idea where it's at. But they have city celebrations going on, and there's these martial artists, and they're all showing off their skills. then we follow a kite around. So we see the martial artists, I think there's 5 schools, if I remember right, and they're all showing off skills, and then we follow this kite around. The kite goes, it's like the Forrest Gump feather kite. You know, the Forrest Gump feather you watch and you're like, and there's that music. Well, this is like you follow a kite, and the kite ends up in Mr. Ip's house. And it just looks like some rich guy's house. And I'm like, wow, that guy's doing pretty well for himself. And it seems like if you are fighting a wood pole and you're in shape, you're gonna do well. So this is what happens with this guy. He becomes wealthy. And in here, he's talking with this gray suit. I wrote gray suit sensei. I don't know his name, but a gray suit sensei guy. And they're talking about sparring. But first, Mr. Ip must eat. And he must eat with his family. Now, there's this whole family dynamic. With this movie, there's this family dynamic where he seems more interested in fighting, and he's settled down. I think he got his fighting days over, and he's rich, and he's got a family now, and a kid. And the kid's more of this artist type. You'll see that later. He's doing these little, like, drawings and or paintings or something. It's very modern art. It's like, this kid's a brilliant modern artist, right? And he's not interested, the kid's not interested in martial arts, which makes Mr. Ip very upset. But anyway, just to move on, Mr. Ip must eat with his family, so the gray suit sensei, he eats with the family as well, and then they clean up after themselves, and they talk for a little bit and whatnot. Well, remember the kite, right? So the kite came in all Forrest Gump feather-like, and a kite runner kid, he goes after his kite, and he's getting his kite, and he looks through a window, and he sees Mr. Ip and the gray suit sensei, and they're getting ready to spar finally, and they spar, and I gotta say, Mr. Ip doesn't even break a sweat. They're sparring, and it's funny too, because they're sparring, and the gray suit sensei keeps like trying not to hit potted plant like pots. I don't know. You know, those things that people are like, that's a pot, but it's ancient. So it's been in the family for a while. So that one's really important. Don't break it. And so he doesn't break it. They're doing a spar. They're not really like kicking each other's butt. It's an introduction to Mr. Ip and his powers. And Mr. Ip definitely wins the sparring fight. And the gray suit sensei, he's super honored to be beaten up. Well, to lose the fight. And that's pretty much it. We follow the kite runner after this, and he spreads the word in the market of the city about Mr. Ip, and he's at the market, and he's spreading the word like, yeah, you know, our senseis, the 5 schools, the gray suit sensei, yeah, this rich dude just like messed him up in the sparring match. It was incredible, and it really was. Like the fight scenes in this whole thing, and I can't get into every single little detail. They punch left here, they kick. And it's not one of those kind of podcasts. You have to watch it for the fights itself. The fights are all really good, by the way. So even if you're not interested in the story, the fighting and the fight scenes are really cool. So the kite runner's spreading the word about Mr. Ip, who's also at the market, which is weird. And he's having lunch with some glasses businessman dude who'll show up later on in this movie. But they're having oysters, and Mr. Ip loves his oysters because, you know, he's rich and he can afford them. So he's enjoying it's oyster time with the glasses businessman. And they're having oysters and whatnot and talking about God knows what. They're just discussing something probably like the fight. Mr. Ip's, it's already gotten to the glasses dude that Mr. Ip has beaten the sensei. And they're talking about it already. Now, the word's been spread. But this is where the gray suit sensei finds out the kite runner, he's been talking smack, so he threatens him. And so everyone's at the market, even gray suit sensei's there, and he has like the star student guy, so I'm going to call him the star student, and there's like a back and forth thing, and there's like a yelling, singing thing, like they yell at each other, but the kite runner dude, he's singing his yelling. It's very weird. And then finally the star student just gets upset and depants the kite runner, and they all laugh, like his butt showing and everything, and the crowd gather around. They're like, you better stop talking crap or you get depantsed. And it is pretty funny. And then after that, a policeman shows up. So I'm calling him Mr. Policeman. He comes up and he ruins the situation. He's like, no one gets de-pantsed in my city. Not on my watch. And he pulls out a gun, right? He pulls out a gun to stop the ruckus. He comes out with a gun, waving it around. Mr. Ip, at this point, he stops eating oysters. He's like, I've had enough oysters. Maybe he was eating oysters because he wants to get down with his wife that night, you know? And he's like, I've had enough oysters. What's this ruckus? So he goes outside, he investigates, right? And he sees the policeman. And Mr. Policeman's waving the gun around. Mr. Ip does not like that. He fights with his hands mostly. So Mr. Ip grabs the gun from the Mr. Policeman's hand, and he pushes 2 fingers into the cylinder, the spinny revolver part, you know, because it's a revolver, and that shoots out of it. It's super cool how they did it, and it's like makes Ip Man look badass, look awesome. And then the gun's like worthless, so Mr. Policeman's all embarrassed about it, and Mr. Ip, he ends up telling Mr. Policeman, no, don't do this. You have brought shame to us all. You have brought shame to your family and to your city. They talk. And then there's this sort of situation where Mr. Ip gets a package from the glasses business guy, the guy he was talking with earlier. I don't know if it's blood money or if it's like heroin, it's some sort of drug, or it's something. Maybe it's rice. There's a rice thing later. It's kind of weird, and they don't really, they probably do explain it. I almost said they don't explain it, but they probably explained it very detailed, and I had no idea what they were talking about. So there's that. And then later that night, so it's all like in the same day, I think, because at night, at Mr. Ip's place, there's the star student. Remember that guy? Star student who pants the kite runner dude. He comes over because he wants to spar. But Mr. Ip's family, it's nighttime, they're having dinner, and they're all, like, the wife and the kid, they're all butthurt that Mr. Ip wants to fight. Because he's retired, right? But he doesn't want to retire. He doesn't even look like he should retire. He just made a revolver useless. Now, the policeman who was holding it was pretty useless, but still. So they fight, and the family's all kind of upset. The wife leaves, and the kid kind of leaves too, and he's mad. And it's a pretty cool fight, but it's clear that he needs to spend a little more time with his family, because after the fight, his wife shows Mr. Ip, here's the art your kid drew, or painted, or whatever, right? And it's him, it's like the family, it's really crappy painting, to be honest, but you know, it's your kid, and your kid's like 3 or whatever, and that, so you're like, oh, that's why you got all upset. I'm practicing my art, but I neglect his. And that's pretty much it. Now, we get into the meat and potatoes of the story. So, you've been introduced to Mr. Ip. He's clearly rich. He's clearly enjoys his oysters. He needs to maybe pay a little more attention to his family, but he loves fighting. And we see that he's a good fighter. He whoops up on the star student. And it's like, oh, okay. Even as an old man, you can teach these young bucks something. Well, now we're at the meat and potatoes because we get introduced to a group of ruffians that are going about the city. And there's this guy, I'm going to call him the King Ruffian, KR. King Ruffian, or KR, might work. He goes around to the different martial arts schools in the center of the city, which makes me think, like, in China back then, did they have the center of the city was surrounded by the martial arts schools because it was that important? Or is that just for this movie? I have no idea. All I know is he goes one by one, and King Ruffian, he goes to the martial arts schools because he wants to whoop the masters there. He wants to lay the beat down on them. And he does. He has this interesting brawler style, by the way. He doesn't make the brawler sacrifice. Don't get that mixed up. That's Train to Busan. But this guy's got a brawler style anyway. But he's not honorable enough to make a brawler sacrifice. That's for sure. But he does definitely fight, and he's very good with his style. And he fights with the sword even, and he must defeat all the senseis, so all the students watch their senseis just getting roughed up by this nothing, like, who knows who he is? He's just a brawler from the streets, but he grew up on the streets, so he knows how to fight, and he knows how to fight hard, and he whoops them all. And then we cut to Mr. Ip, and he's having a morning meeting. He's having a morning meeting. He's having a morning with his family, and he decides, like, I must be better to my kid. And his wife's like, yes, do that. And so they're trying to get back, get the glue back in the family. And that's when they're having their morning, and the star student runs up, and he's like, remember how you beat me up last night? There's a brawler dude who's trying to beat up other people. And you beat me up, so I should tell you because you need to beat him up. And Mr. Ip is he's desiring the kicking of someone's ass. He's ready to kick some booty. And he looks at his family, and his family's like, it's in your blood. Go do that. Your kid's just going to do some art anyway. And Mr. Ip's like, nice. But I'm going to stay here. I'm not going to do anything. And they're like, okay, well. We then cut back to the King Ruffian, and he's smacking up that gray suit sensei. He's smacking him up, and he's fighting him. I think this is the one with the sword for a little bit. Maybe not. Maybe I'm mixing something up. But he lays the beat down at him, and then they have a celebration. Him and his cronies, they have a celebration by eating noodles, which is like, all right, fair enough. Noodles are pretty awesome. So I concur. Enjoy your ramen. So they start eating ramen, and he's like, I've won. I'm the most powerful person in this city. But wait, there's a waiter. And when the ruffians are all talking to the King Ruffian, they're like, you are the best. Here, the waiter walks in. He's like, pfft. He does that. Pfft. He looks at him. He's like, yeah, right. What about Mr. Ip over on Rich Guy Avenue? And they're like, Rich Guy Avenue? We thought those were all bankers. And he's like, pfft. Nah, martial arts. You do well in this city, you can live at Rich Guy Avenue, right? And King Ruffian finds out about Mr. Ip, and he's like, oh, Mr. Ip is the final boss. I have to mess this guy up. So he visits. He visits his house in Rich Guy Avenue, and the whole town visits because they're like, we know Mr. Ip. And there's this talking thing like, we need a spar. And he's like, I'm at my house with my family, and they're talking about sparring. And, I assume the ruffians all call him a chicken. And he's like, I won't be called chicken. He's got the Marty McFly issue. He's like, I cannot be called chicken. And his wife is like, all right, we're leaving. And I'm taking the kid. We're not leaving. We're just leaving the room. Don't worry about that. So they leave, and Mr. Policeman comes in. He's like, I'm going to break up the match. And Mr. Ip looks at him, and he's like, no, but you'll take everyone out of here, and I'll fight him mano a mano. So they fight, and the fight ensues. And this is a good fight. This is the best. The best fights are with the King Ruffian in this whole movie, to be honest, because this one has a lot of humor with it too. Remember earlier when he's fighting the gray suit sensei, Mr. Ip's fighting him, and then try not to break pots and stuff? Well, King Ruffian doesn't care about his pots, so they get broken, and Mr. Ip is visibly upset. He's like, that's an ancient dynasty pot that you just broke. And you can see it in his face that he's destroyed by this moment. And then there's a situation where Mr. Ip's kid comes in, but he's on a tricycle. And that's during the fight, and they all like stop and wait for the kid to do a circle and leave again. Mr. Ip's like looking at him like, really, kid? And King Ruffian's like laughing about it. And then he sees that back and forth thing. So Mr. Ip, he lays the beat down this time, and he just boom, 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 boom. Someone, Baka boy, cut that out. Actually, you could put that at the, don't put that at the end. That's just me going boom, ba-da-dum, boom, boom. But that boom, ba-da-dum, boom, boom. That's how he beats him down, right? And King Ruffian, he just gets dusted. He gets his ass literally spanked in it, and he's like hurt from it. And Mr. Ip, he wins, and the crowd cheers, and it's basically the end. There's some other stuff. It's some boring stuff that happens, and then it's like, okay. And you're like, oh, that's the movie, right? Well, no. The tone changes. It goes kind of black and white for the most part, certain parts of this. And war comes marching in. That's when the Japanese come in to mess things up, really. And that's when you get historical, because they all invaded and whatnot. And then it goes back to regular color and Mr. Ip. And Mr. Ip is poor now. He's slumming it. So we see him slumming it, and then he goes to get some rice, and they have like here a rice truck, and here's your one rice for the week kind of situation. Rice is super important, by the way. And then he meets up with the glasses businessman, the guy who's eating oysters with earlier, and they meet up to discuss glasses businessman's his cotton shop. He's got like a cotton. I was watching, and I was like, is that soap? Does he have a soap shop? Are they making soap? It was all foamy and stuff, and I was like, oh, it's cotton. Ew. It was just fresh cotton. That sounds horrible. Thinking about cotton balls ripping and stuff like that. I don't know about you guys, but a ripped cotton ball sends goosebumps all down my arms. It just sounds terrible. Well, they talk, and I don't know what they talk about. They're probably talking about the Japanese here. This sucks. And they're like, yeah, And then there's some more family stuff. And then Mr. Ip, he gets a job shoveling coal, I think. He's working there, and he sees the star student kid from earlier, the one that he laid the beat down on, but it was more of a spar match. He didn't really beat him up. And he's now a star student man, but he's more like a shoveling guy now, and that's what he does. And then the Japanese visit, and they have Mr. Policeman. Remember Mr. Policeman? They have him, but now he's Mr. Bootlicker, because he's like their mouthpiece. He's their bootlicker. And he goes up, and he's like, who wants to be tribute? And it's a who wants to be tribute type of scene. And the star student raises his hand, and I will be. Well, they take the star student, they take him to the rice fights. The rice fight dojo. And it's all in black and white, and it's very violent, and it's cool. And it's like an underground dojo between Japanese and Chinese, I guess. And they get people to practice in there. And there's fighting, and the gray suit sensei's there as well, getting rice. Because when you win, you get rice. That's the thing. Now, Mr. Ip, he decides to go to the rice fights the next time they come in to ask for a tribute, because he's like, where's my star student? Where's the, not his star student, but the star student kid? And he goes there, and we see that the gray suit sensei's fighting. And he's doing pretty good. He's going 3-on-1, and he wins. He's in the rice fight dojo. And he gets his rice, and he picks it up, and he's walking away. And this evil nerd, Japanese evil military nerd, I'm just going to call him evil nerd from now on. He shoots him while he's turned around, and it's not very honorable. There's another Japanese guy, a military guy, who's got a shaved head, and he's the final boss in this, by the way. He gets super mad at this, I think. I don't know. And he kind of gives the evil nerd guy like a little bit of a, yelling thing. And this is when Mr. Ip, who saw this, and he's like, that's my friend, the one I sparred and whooped. Now I'm mad. So he gets super pissed off, and he enters the dojo, and he calls everybody out. He calls the final boss out. He calls that nerd out. He calls everybody out. And the final boss is like, I'm going to summon 9 of my guys right now. So he summons 9 of the guys around, and he's like, kill him. And Mr. Ip, he destroys them. This is probably the third coolest fight, is the 9-on-1, and Mr. Ip just quickly demolishes. He destroys them. And after he's done destroying them, and actually the cool thing is, it's one of those, 8 of them are down, and Mr. Ip's up, and then there's one left, and I thought he was going to run. And he's like, no, I'll try it, and it was a mistake. He got smacked down too. But when this happens, basically the last guy falls over, and all the rest get up because they're like, we're going to take vengeance. And Mr. Ip's like, whatever, I will do this. And that's when the final boss, he halts the action, and he goes into the dojo. He was overlooking it before. He comes down and goes into the dojo, and he's like, here's your rice, or you want to be a part of this. They talk about something, and Mr. Ip's like, this is beneath me. So he just decides to grab the rice that was intended for the gray suit sensei. He grabs that rice, and he delivers it to the widow, and it's kind of short. And on his delivery, the Mr. Bootlicker, the Mr. Policeman guy, who's now Mr. Bootlicker, is with him. And Mr. Ip Man, he smacks Mr. Bootlicker. Everyone beats up Mr. Bootlicker. And then there's some more family crap. Honestly, that's kind of the most boring stuff. I think it probably holds meaning or something there. I was thinking is him getting over being violent and retiring and being close with his family, but it was kind of boring, so it is what it is. Also, there's a scene where the wife takes care of Mr. Ip's bloody knuckles, and I guess that's kind of touching. She takes care of him. She's like, I don't like you fighting, but I'll take care of you. So that's kind of neat. And then we cut to the King Ruffian. Now, remember King Ruffian? He's stealing a vehicle, and he's got a gang, too. He's got a gang of ruffians, a bigger gang than he even used to have. And they steal a truck and go to the cotton factory to mess them up a little bit, you know? Mr. Ip, now he gets told about this, so he goes to the cotton factory, and he trains the cotton factory workers to do basic self-defense in case King Ruffian comes back. And then there's a scene where the evil nerd Japanese dude, that military guy beats the hell out of Mr. Bootlicker for basically like, we wanted Mr. Ip to come back and you haven't brought him to us kind of thing. Then there's some more family time with Mr. Ip, and this is outside in the slums. And this is after the beating situation with Mr. Bootlicker. And you have a kid, he goes away for a little bit and you hear bang, 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 bang. And he starts walking back, bang, bang. And the evil nerd guy has his gun out and he's pretending to shoot him too. And Mr. Ip does not take this well. He pushes this kid aside to, protect him. The wife starts running away. Evil nerd guy, he's like, I want to start rustling the wife's jimmies, if you know what I mean. And so he starts going up that way to, get her, and Mr. Ip just beats him up. And there's two other guys with him, and he beats all of them up. And he beats the nerd. He beats the nerd guy up really good. And the Mr. Bootlicker's there. And Mr. Bootlicker's looking around, and he sees the nerd guy on the ground, and he just starts kicking his leg because the evil nerd has broken his leg at this point. So he starts kicking it, and it's like, Afterwards, Mr. Bootlicker gets punished. It's kind of weird. It's like, I expected him to die for that insubordination, but we still need you, so you just get punished. He gets punished pretty good. He gets messed up. And then so that happens, and Mr. Ip and his family kind of all go in hiding a little bit. And eventually, this is when the King Ruffian comes back with his gang to the factory. And they fight back this time. And they do a pretty good job. They still get their, butts kind of kicked a little, but they fight back enough to where it's like, oh, this is going to be kind of a pain in the butt. And when it's like the tides are turning, that's when Mr. Ip comes in, and he makes sure that King Ruffian and his gang do not destroy these people. And that fight is probably the coolest. There's a bit with axes and whatnot. Mr. Ip, I think he uses his first weapon in this, or his only one. He uses a long pole, and he also smacks King Ruffian on the butt again too, which is kind of funny. And there's this big old fight. I think that's the best fight in the whole movie, to be honest. That was my favorite one. And while the fight's going on and the gang of ruffians are defeated and they start walking away, that's when we see the kite runner kid. Remember him? Kite runner was there, and Mr. Ip stops him before he can just leave completely, and he gives the kid his kite back because he kept the kite and he was holding on to it the whole time, which is kind of like, why were you holding it then? But okay, I guess you just held it for luck. So he gives the kite back to Kite Runner, and the Kite Runner breaks down emotionally. He's like, I am so ashamed. I am not honorable. And then the next bit is Mr. Bootlicker running to warn Mr. Ip about the cotton factory, because the Japanese got wind of the cotton factory and the self-defense over there. And they decide that they need to seize it because Mr. Ip always goes over there. So Mr. Ip comes running, But when he gets there, he sees all the Japanese are there with their guns and stuff. And he's like, oh, crap. And he has to surrender, and he gets taken away by the Japanese. Because the final boss wants a final fight, one-on-one, mano-a-mano, right? This is how it's going to be. And there's a final meal situation where Mr. Ip's talking to the final boss about something. I think they disagree. It's Japanese, Chinese, it's tomatoes, right? So they're disagreeing about this. And the final boss also talks to the now limping evil nerd dude. He's limping pretty good because he got messed up. He's talking to him. And he's like, if this fight doesn't go well, kill him, okay? And he's like, you got it, boss. So the final fight. This is in the town square. Now, first, let me think. Before the fight, we see like this little situation where Mr. Ip's family is getting kidnapped, but it's by the glasses business guy, the guy who owns the cotton factory. And they're getting kidnapped for some reason, but it doesn't make sense because they get delivered to the town square and they see the final fight anyway, so I didn't quite understand that. And the final fight is cool. That is definitely up there. That is a really cool one. They have a battle between the final boss and Mr. Ip. And Mr. Ip goes super fast. He goes like Super Saiyan, right? And he's just going super quick with it and punching him. And we get these cutaways to like the wood pole dummy at the beginning thing where it shows Mr. Ip practicing, and then it cuts back and he's punching the real guy and punching him. And he defeats him because Mr. Ip has that wood pole training. And it was never like a close call thing. There's a couple of close calls, quote, but it's really like, nah, there's no chance. This final boss is just destroyed at the end of it. And Mr. Ip, he turns around and he's looking at his wife and he's looking at the crowd, and they're all super excited because, this was a public display and everyone's there. And then bang, he gets shot. And he falls. He falls off the like raised platform, and he falls down, and you think, oh no, he's dead. And everyone riots at this point. Even Mr. Bootlicker. He sees the evil nerd who just shot the guy, and he grabs the gun, and shoots the Japanese evil nerd in the head for him. We don't really see it, but we know that's what happened. And everyone rushes in to fight. And then it ends. Pretty much, they're almost there. There's words on a screen, and there's a possibility that Mr. Ip lived. He's in the back of the truck, looking kind of alive, looking kind of dead. And that's it. That's the ending situation there. But for the most part, I gotta say, that was a really good movie. That was pretty much it. At least that's what my note said. And that's what I think actually happened. It might have been completely different. And I assume he lived because when I was looking it up, there's Ip Man 2 and Ip Man 3. Unless it's like Ip Man Origins or something. There's a bunch of writing at the end of it, and the writing implies something. I don't know. Yeah. Okay, so the music was good. It was really good throughout. The sets were really full, and, it made you believe it was in that time. And it was like, wow, they did a lot of effort into this. I saw the poster and I was like, I didn't even think it would be kind of this way. I thought it'd be more fantastical. And there's a couple elements of the kung fu that are a little bit out there, like a little ridiculous. But for the most part, what they do with humor is really good. And, it's choreographed, and everything for the most part seems like realistic to a certain point. The story had its beats, it had its breaks from just fighting, and it had like little moments. The de-pantsing scene was funny, the tricycle scene was funny, and the fact that like he was trying to figure out how to be good with his family and still have this passion for fighting and stuff like that. I'm torn with initially I was like, that's a hard 4, and now I'm thinking like a soft 5. That was really good. I'd enjoy watching it again. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe in between, maybe a soft hard 5. Is that in between? Nah, that doesn't make sense. Or hard soft 4. Maybe a little bit more than a hard 4. It was good. I could go either way. It would be one of those that would be definitely worth watching again with subtitles if contractually I was allowed to watch it. Even without that, I could say that was one of those movies where you can enjoy it without subtitles. You can enjoy it without dubs, obviously. It all makes sense. All the characters are easy to spot out. You know what's going on. It was a very enjoyable movie. So, definitely a good movie. I suggest it. Please go see it if you haven't seen it. I watched on Netflix. I was able to turn off the subtitles, so completely lost there. Thank you, Netflix. I did not have to use the pillow method. Oh, a last thing. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Give us 5 stars. Put the word out there. We've got a plan, Baka Boy and I. The plan is called the Triangle Plan. We're at the top of the triangle, okay? And you listeners are going down the line. Now, to make the triangle have a nice, good base, and then another base underneath it, and then another base underneath that, we need you guys to spread the word to at least 2 people. So, like a triangle, The Triangle Plan. So more people get involved with listening to this show. I'm sure there's people who enjoy Ip Man. I'm sure there's people who might enjoy some of the other movies that we watched. I know Let the Right One In was popular. You could tempt them with that, or Train to Busan, or All Quiet on the Western Front. Get the word out there. We definitely appreciate it. Use this triangle plan. We're going to use this triangle plan to success. And the benefits at your level are going to grow stronger with the more people that you can get. That's my call to action. So here's what we're going to do. Go out there, call to action, help build this triangle with us, this triangle plan. Give us a review, 5 stars, a hard 5 out of 5, please. Write something nice up there. Tell as many people as you want. You can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/nosubsnodubspod. And if you want to spend 50 cents per show or $2 a month, that's patreon.com/nosubsnodubs. Anyway, I am Casey K, the Kamikaze Kid, blowing up all over this bitch. Take it away, Baka Boy. And I was thinking, that's another thing too. I was thinking about it with flags and whatnot. Did they always have that flag? Is that how it always was? Is just a red dot, right? Or is that the World War II flag? And Japan's had a different flag before that. Is there anyone out there who could possibly know a history of flags? Which might make a good podcast, a history of flags, where you just talk about flags, right? They have a history of everything. That's pretty niche down. You could just talk about flags all day.